Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. Well, you've already been here. Welcome back is what I really should have said. Here with me, as always, is my colleague, Shannon Vasconcelos. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth.
So Shannon's a former financial aid officer at BU and Tufts. We are going to be answering your questions. But before we get to that, in the first segment, I shared that we would be announcing the winner of our podcast review contest. As a reminder, we encourage you to review us at Apple Podcasts. That's going to help us help more people find us more easily. So if you want to help out a friend, a family member, someone that you don't know, just a random act of kindness, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and that will help us come up to the forefront a bit more. So anyway, we do want to thank those of you who did enter the contest and by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. And no surprise to anyone, the winner is in our target audience. And she's the mom of a rising senior and a rising freshman. So this is top of mind for her. And her name is Deborah Y2K. And she left us a review on April 17th. And I wanted to just quickly read her review because I loved it. And the title was Podcast That Takes You From Panicked to Prepared. Like, that's awesome, Deborah. And I might want to steal that
I
for
know
marketing.
that should be our tagline.
It
That's
should
great.
be. It should be. So Deborah writes, very happy to have discovered Getting In when she did. At first, I was a casual listener when I tuned in at the start of the pandemic with a sophomore and a seventh grader. Now I look forward to new episodes every week and feel far less overwhelmed than I did a year ago. We're well into junior year, and my son and I have been able to pace ourselves as we research schools and consider all the invaluable advice and information from experts and speakers on the podcast. It's actually been fun to look into the buyer and seller schools and think about exciting options for schools that hadn't been on our radar previously. So, Deborah, thank you for the wonderful review. Thank you for entering. You need to claim your prize, which is 2 hours with me. And again, hopefully that's a prize. Email us, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. Again, it's gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. And just let us know that you heard your name announced and you're ready to claim your prize, and we will get you all set up. So, Shannon, why don't we go from that to questions? And all of a sudden, I'm looking for my questions, but I have them. Hold on. So we did get a few from our listeners, and the first one that I have for you asks, next year my daughter will be attending an out-of-state college. So yay, congrats to your daughter. Decision day was on May 1, so now she's getting ready to go. Once she moves out and heads to college, will she qualify for in-state tuition? I know the answer here.
You do.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the answer is in all likelihood, no. Generally, when you're accepted as an out-of-state student, you remain an out-of-state student for all 4 years. Now, every state is a little bit different, so I would definitely advise you to go ahead and look at the residency policy for the state she'll be attending school. You should be able to find it right on the college's website, where they will detail what is required to become an in-state student. But most of the time they make it pretty difficult. Essentially, when you're accepted as an out-of-state student, the college is counting on your out-of-state tuition for all 4 years, so they don't make it particularly easy to gain residency. Normally, there's some language in the residency policy about you cannot have moved to the state primarily for educational purposes, which kind of by definition, when you're moving there to go to school, that it's for educational purposes. There's also usually language about if the student is a minor, their residency is based upon the residency of their parents. And I use, I think, the wrong term, minor. We're not necessarily talking about under 18, but essentially a dependent student. So there is always a way to appeal a residency decision and appeal to gain residency. Normally it entails things like making sure you've got all your paperwork in order, like the student's name on a lease in that state, driver's license in that state, registered to vote in that state, like really sort of committed to living in that state. As well as often they have to prove that they are no longer a dependent of their parent and they're really supporting themselves. So occasionally that will work. And there are some states that make it easier than others, but most of the time you want to be prepared. If you're accepted as an out-of-state student, you need to be prepared to pay that full out-of-state tuition for all 4 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I have two things about this. The first is if you wonder why that is, and that seems unfair, and I was reading an article in the LA Times. We taped this is it's May 5th as I'm taping this, but that appeared yesterday or the day before, and I believe it was UCLA last year. I think, and again, I don't have all my facts. One of these facts I have for sure. And it was either 700 or 800 they fell short of out-of-state enrollees in last year's class. And that equated to, and here's the number I'm positive of, $60 million loss for them. And I remember, because I just remember thinking, oh my God, how is that possible? But not getting those out-of-state students meant $60 million loss for them. So unfortunately, the way that this works is that the states are doing less and less to fund their in-state institutions, and therefore out-of-state students bring more money with them, and that helps them stay afloat at the level that they have been. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have talked about this on the show a number of times. And if you're curious and you'd like to go back and listen to a full-length segment on this very subject, we blog about every podcast that we do. So if you go to our blog and you search in the blog for in-state tuition for out-of-state students or something along those lines, it should pop up every blog we've ever written about this, but also tell you what dates the podcast ran on. So that's sort of our secret little search engine for the podcast.
Definitely.
All right, Shannon, what do you have for me?
We have a question from Suzanne, and she asks, I'm wondering if, given the tremendous increase in applications this year, do you anticipate college admissions offices changing their supplemental essays in order to have a more informative and efficient process next year? Should students wait to begin writing their supplemental essays rather than doing them based on the essays that were advertised in prior years, even if they have not changed in a long time? Do they need to wait? Do you think colleges will be changing those?
Okay, so, well, first of all, I don't think that changing supplemental essays will generally create a more efficient process. I don't think supplemental essays create a more efficient process. They can certainly create a more informative process, but not an efficient one. I don't really think those two necessarily go hand in hand. It is always a general rule of thumb that you should anticipate that schools will indeed change their supplemental prompts. They don't always, and as you noted, there are some schools where the supplements stay the same year over year, but they all do reserve the right to change them. Often schools, well, not often, but sometimes schools will say, hey, we're not changing our prompts this year, and they'll do that early. So they might make that announcement now or within the next month or two, knowing that students are hoping to use the summer as a good time to get started on the applications. And by the way, I highly recommend using the summer to get started on those applications. But I do almost always have my students wait until August 1, when colleges usually officially announce what their supplemental questions are going to be before they start working on those. The UC system will often confirm these are going to stay the same, and they usually do that earlier than later. I haven't heard this year. That could be A, because I have forgotten to take a look, or B, because they haven't officially announced that yet, but they will often announce early, and some other schools will. You can always try calling, but they may not know. So often if you call the school, they'll say, we're not sure yet. We think they're going to be the same, but we're not positive. And if they think, but they're not positive, I would wait. You don't want to be writing essays that you don't need to write. So I think that's in general a good rule of thumb, and nothing related to the pandemic, quite honestly. All right, Shannon, let me go back to my list. And next question for you is, my son is on the wait list for his first choice college. If he's accepted off of the wait list, what kind of financial aid can we expect? Good one.
I think this is another one you likely know the answer to, Beth, but
Yes.
I would say in all likelihood, not much financial aid. When colleges go to pull students off of the wait list. They're looking to meet all sorts of different institutional needs. And very often, students who can pay full tuition is a great big old institutional need. And they are, in order to kind of fill those gaps, they are very often looking for what they call full pay students, students who they do not have to provide financial aid to. I would say, and this is with rare exceptions, sometimes the very, very rich schools who can guarantee they're going to meet everybody's need will sometimes do that off of the wait listed as well. Outside of the very rich schools, historically, I would say, almost always they were looking for full pay students. I have seen some wacky things happen in the last admission cycle as well as this one, of students being pulled off wait lists with some money as colleges have been sort of uncertain about filling their classes. I actually have seen some students be pulled off a wait list with some money, more so the last couple years than in the past. So it's always, it's in the realm of possibility. I'd say more so now than in the past. But as a general rule, still, I would say colleges are often looking for full pay students when pulling off of their wait list. So it can be a strategy if your top priority is attending this particular school where you are on the wait list. You want to do what you need to do to get in, informing the school that you are willing to waive any consideration for financial aid is a strategy that may help your case to come off the wait list. It certainly wouldn't be your whole case, but it could be something that works in your favor. But of course, I would say, you only want to consider this if you have the means to pay for the school and are willing to do so. If you are not willing to do so, or you can't pay for the school out of pocket, which most people cannot pay for most schools out of pocket, don't do that. Take your chances on the wait list. If you need financial aid, you need to keep that application for financial aid in play.
Right, exactly. Shannon and I are both clear here. You shouldn't be going $100,000 into debt because, or more, or $300,000 into debt, right? Just
Right.
to get off the wait list at a top choice. If you listen to this podcast, we are never in favor of that. One caveat I would add is I actually do think the UCs are not looking at ability to pay when they pull off the wait list, and they do have quite a lot of wait list movement. They are designed to go to their wait list. So I know Shannon was careful to say that not everyone does it this way, and I just want to underscore that and say too that at the private schools is probably and maybe that's not entirely true. And Shannon, I welcome your thoughts
Yeah.
on that, but I think at private schools is where your chances of getting off the wait list are typically better if you are full pay than if you need financial aid.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing I would say specifically about the UCs, one reason why they don't really have to look at that feature of whether you can pay or not is because they also do not provide much of any financial aid, particularly to out-of-state students. So they're not looking to fund you, regardless.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's, you're probably not getting it, period, whether you get in regular or off the wait list. And so that's an important point. All right, Shannon, we're going to stop here and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get back to people's questions. So don't go away.